Hello, my friends, and welcome once again to 7 Real Let's Not Meet Stories from Reddit. Meeting other people can fill us with an array of emotions. Excitement, joy, anticipation, and sometimes fear. Here's 7 Let's Not Meet Stories from Reddit users. This is my first time post. I've become semi-obsessed with the sub after stumbling upon Reddit for the first time relatively recently. I genuinely find many of these recounted stories more engrossing than any TV indulgence. Reading these deep into the late night hour while I attempt to let sleep overcome me has inspired me to keep a loaded mag and my lovely but previously neglected Glock 43 9mm piece within arm's reach. But onto the entry. I live in Los Angeles, full of posers, actors, waiters, savages, saviors, immigrants, transplants, criminals, and all spectrums of individuals. I've met plenty of whack jobs, in other words. This particular incident occurred in 2010. Around 9 p.m., I was in the driver's seat of a friend's small 2-door Infiniti coupe and entering a very busy 405, headed to my house to get dropped off for the evening. As I'm entering, a man in a U-Haul is attempting to exit the following ramp. There was minimal distance between us, as we were nearly parallel, as I got on, and he perceived this, to me, as intentionally cutting him off. I get into the next left lane within seconds, but the man speeds up next to us and rolls down his window and proceeds to barrage us with a stream of vulgar insults. My friend, being the intelligent young man that he was, reciprocates the offensive words, and to my horror, throws an empty water bottle that bounces off the U-Haul. Big mistake. The man immediately jerks his car behind us, instead of exiting on the upcoming ramp. Suddenly, I get a pool of dread in the pit of my stomach. He's so close to the back of the car. I can see the crazed eyes of a disheveled, oily-faced Hispanic guy, 35 years old. I sped up, but I'm paralyzingly afraid because it becomes clear to me, as this man matches my accelerating speed, that he is not going to let this go, and he wants to punish us. He's honking maniacally, flashing his lights and causing a scene behind us. I tell my friend, he's gonna hit us. No, he won't, my friend says. Just speed up. I do to a degree, but I'm nervous of being chased at high speeds, and I want other drivers to witness this man's behavior. Not even 5 seconds after he tells me to speed up, the U-Haul crashes his passenger side into the back end of the coupe and successfully sends us into a fishtail spin, slamming us into a freeway wall. The car is ripped apart from the concrete, yet somehow we're unscathed. He calls the cops and recounts the story, omitting the water bottle portion, of course, but I'm left visibly trembling. I'm fairly certain if this guy had a gun, he would have shot into our vehicle. He was angry. Luckily, 2 separate spectators called the police and reported his license plate, one going so far as to follow him off the freeway and witness him attempt to remove his plates. Turns out he was an immigrant with no legal license who had a previous criminal history involving what else but meth. They never found the guy, assuming that he just left the U.S. My friend ended up suing U-Haul for renting out a vehicle to this man without a valid license. We lost contact shortly thereafter, but 2 years later he contacted me on Facebook, telling me I had a check waiting for me at his lawyer's. To this day, I'm deathly afraid of car accidents and potential scenarios of road rage. I've been reading Let's Not Meet Stories for a while now, and I decided to share my experience with all of you. Now, a little background about myself. I'm a 19-year-old female. I stand around 5'2" and roughly 115 pounds. I'm a sophomore at a university. Anyway, around midterms, a chemistry teacher decided to have a midterm review, so there were people from different chemistry classes. The room got crowded. I was with my best friend Leo. Leo and I noticed one of the students sitting next to me at a distance. I didn't care because the class was full anyway. During the review, I noticed that the guy was slowly scooting closer and closer to me. Note that I'm a bit claustrophobic. Leo noticed as well, and he told me to scoot closer to him, so I did. Thus, the guy began staring at me. He's sitting next to me, on the right side. The board's also on the right side. So if I look to the board, his face is there. I began getting creeped out. I made eye contact with him, and seriously, he gave me the creepiest smile I've ever seen. Finally, the midterm review was over, so I was getting my stuff ready to leave. The guy was standing at the door, staring at me with that same smile. Leo notices and tells me to stay with him as we're leaving. The guy seemed to notice that Leo is not leaving my side, so he left. Sadly, this wasn't my last encounter with this creep. 2 weeks later, my girl best friend, Ella, was walking with me. It was 8 at night, and we just finished our late class. It was dark out there, but there were some lights. As we were walking, guess who I see? That same creep from the review. I look at Ella and tell her it's the same creepy guy from the review. She told me to just ignore it. I made eye contact with the guy, and I swear I'm just crying inside because at this point he again gives me that same smile. Ella saw it as well and told me to keep walking, and he will just keep walking. So seriously, this creep turns around and starts walking behind us. I kept looking back, but not looking back too obviously. Ella and I are pretty much freaking out because we're far away from where the cops usually stay. At this point, we're speed walking, and we hear him whispering some stuff to himself. I couldn't really pick it up, what he was saying. Thankfully, we see campus security. I look behind me to see that he's closer than ever. My friend Ella and I walk towards the security and pretend that we're going to talk to him. The creep nopes out of there and walks away once he figures we're going to talk to security. Ella and I sit down because we were shaking pretty badly. I've not seen the creepy guy for the rest of the semester, and rather is Ella. And now that the semester has started, creepy guy, let's not meet ever again. Edit. The original poster wants to say thank you for all the people who have supported her. I hope none of you have to face what my best friend and I have to face. Always trust your gut. Thank you again. This happened back in 2014. I went out for a night out on Halloween during my first year of university. I was wearing high-heeled boots and a leather jacket. Over the course of the night, drunk me had taken them off and left them at our group's table, due to being uncomfortable. By the end of the night, I practically danced my way to near sobriety, and I went to my group's table. However, they'd given up the table, and my boots and jacket were nowhere to be seen. Someone had stolen them. Whatever, they weren't expensive, and I rarely wore them anyway. Now, however, I had to walk the 15 minutes back to my accommodation. I didn't have money for a taxi, so I thought I would just walk slowly. I asked one guy, this jerk in the group that everyone hated, if he could just keep me company because he was tall. He laughed, said no, and walked off, dragging the only girl who was also shoeless with him. So I was walking alone, shoeless in the busy city center, watching out for broken glass or anything else that was harmful or disgusting. Everyone else was so far ahead that I couldn't even see them, but I just kept going. I was halfway to my place when I stopped by a Middle Eastern man. The city is very culturally diverse. He asked if I was okay, and I was grateful someone cared enough to make sure I was all right. He offered to help me walk home, so I accepted for at least part of the way. He was very kind. He told me his name was Omar. He started saying how beautiful he thought I was, and how lucky he was to have found me, which unsettled me slightly. Once I was around the corner from my place, I thanked Omar, and I said I could walk the rest of the way on my own. He instantly looked offended. "Don't you want to invite me in for a cup of tea to thank me?" I told him no, because I don't know him. He kept a hold of my wrist. "Well, can I have a kiss for helping you?" he says. Again I declined, and his grip tightened. "Well, do I get a hug for being your friend?" he says. By this point, I just wanted him to let go, so I gingerly gave him a hug. He then grabbed me and tried to kiss me, but I pressed my lips together and instead he just licked up my face. I finally get free and start walking away. He follows me. I speed up. So does he. I abandon my check for glass on the floor and begin sprinting, now terrified as I hear him running too. I get out my phone and call my friend Rob, who I beg to help me. Omar is no longer following me, but I needed someone to keep me safe. He agrees and gets to my flat not long after I do, with a knife in case Omar was still there. I told the people in my group, and they were mortified that they'd left me alone. I returned home for a week because I was so thoroughly shook up. Now, on a night out, I make sure everyone is close by, so it doesn't happen again to me, or anyone else. So, Omar, let's not meet. I was on the train, coming back from meeting a friend. I was reading a book on occult magic, and this older guy sat next to me and said, "Well, what's that you're reading? I do magic too," and started chatting to me about all sorts. Cult areas in our town, Illuminati conspiracies. He was saying, "I can tell you're magic. I sensed it as I sat by you. I knew as soon as you boarded." He sounded really interesting with all the things he was talking about. I felt really flattered and pleased with myself. I'd been feeling lonely and down, and I felt really proud of my power of attracting an interesting friend to chat to on the train who knew about occult stuff. I know it sounds seductive and creepy now, but he really didn't seem creepy at all. He just seemed like a really intelligent, educated professor type who was enthusiastic about magic and occult stuff and wanted to share his knowledge with someone. He seemed really wise-sounding and spiritual, like a church pastor or Eckhart Tolle on TV. I just thought about all my magic reading. Perhaps had manifested a new friend to chat about stuff. So I agreed to meet him for coffee in a week. Also, he told me that he worked at the refugee center, and I told him I had applied for a job there. He promised to get me in if I chatted to him. Anyway, I met him and didn't enjoy it. Told me he was gay and used to be a boy prostitute. He was really flirty and creepy with me. He got me to walk to his house with him as he had forgotten his wallet. His house was covered in letters from the local mental hospital, which I recognized as a friend gets them too, about meds and appointments. Letters all over the floors and the chairs. He had a picture of himself with blue scribbled around it. And he said, "You're psychic. You can see the blue psychic color." And he kept going on and on about my aura, and then he would giggle crazily, jumping up and down, waving around a dowsing stick that was snapped off an old aerial. Also, he found a brand of liquor with his surname, and he bought loads and loads of bottles of it and said that his Illuminati family made the drink and were millionaires, but had cast him out. He kept telling me loads of stories about how he teaches psychic skill to the king of Saudi, and he was in hiding and used to live in a castle in France with the Illuminati. He was saying, "I'm your messiah now. You need to develop your skills. When I bring you back here, I'll take you upstairs, and we can begin." He would say things like, "I need to know everything about you." I was scared and made an excuse and got away from him. But he was sad and crying. "I wanted to take you out for dinner and drinks tonight. I'm so lonely." I was too scared and guilty to say I didn't want to see him again, so I just said I gotta go. He texted me that night with a list of philosophy books I need to read to start my learning. He didn't know anything about magic. He couldn't say more to me than just repeating, "I'm magic, but I can't tell you more till we begin training." He was really mentally ill. He kept talking for half a sentence, then giggling and forgetting what he was saying, trailing off all the time and muttering. I felt so dumb and disappointed. I know it sounds like I'm so naive, but he was so different when I met him. He just seemed like a calm, wise old professor who wanted to chat with someone about occult stuff. He was saying on the train that he does work at the refugee center because he knows so much about Islam and they all respect him. He sounded so clever and so calm. Okay, I've been engrossed in the subreddit and I've decided to share a creepy experience with you guys. I have plenty more to share if you'd like. Bit of backstory. I'm a 17-year-old male living in New South Wales, Australia. Half Asian and, in a way, female-looking. I'm around average height and very thin. I have what you could call emo-esque hair. This is coming into play later on. So this happened about 2 days ago. I live in a typical Australian suburb. Nothing out of the ordinary in Australia where I live. There's a lot of heavily wooded areas, as well as very swampy areas. So, here we go. Me and all my wisdom decided to go for a walk. The area I went isn't frequently traveled to, as it's very rural for the city I live in. It's where the new housing estates are getting built. I love this area as it's so picturesque and quiet. Now I'm walking alone, listening to music. It's about 40-ish minutes from my house. You have to go through a lot of bushland, I should mention, and my neighborhood backs into an industrial estate which is in decline. I walk and it's quite a normal day until I see a bunch of what look like construction workers talking to each other and occasionally glancing at me. I thought nothing of it and kept on my merry way. Now this area, my safe haven, is on the fringe of both what used to be the industrial area and the new houses, where I always sat and looked into the distance. Where I looked, there was always a fence. I never went past the fence because of the barbed wire on top of it. But that day I felt adventurous and saw there was a gap in the fence that led beyond. Checked in the workers in case they saw me. I didn't want to get in trouble, but they were gone. So I went through. This is where it began. I walked for a solid 7 minutes into the area when I sat in the grass. Now the grass is very tall, it's about up to my waist. As I'm standing there, I admire the view. Then I hear in a male's voice, "Where did it get to?" I was freaked out a little as I was in a reserve and I thought that I was caught, so I dashed away into the taller grass. Another male says, "We know you're here. Come out. You're not in trouble." I was in full panic mode, like, who would say that to someone, especially a stranger? I glanced at the people calling out for me, and no surprise, they were the workers from the site. I assumed they must have followed me. Come out, little rabbit. We won't hurt you." "Well, not much," said a raspy-sounding voice. I glanced at these workers. One had a roll of duct tape, another one rope, and a female had a large wrench. I was taught as a kid how to get away from strangers in cars, but nothing of this caliber. I grab a piece of large sandstone from the ground. It's light. I hurl it into the grass far away from me, and they go running towards it, Idiots, I thought to myself. I book it down through the long grass and climb the fence into the industrial estate. As I'm over the fence, I see the workers on top of the hill, pointing at me. They leg it towards me, yelling, "Oi, come back here!" I proceed to nope out of there, back to my house. I haven't seen these people since, but what frightens me the most is I'm pretty sure they thought I was a girl. I don't know what their intentions were, but they weren't good at all. So, creepy, obviously fake workmen, let's not meet again. So, this is a story that happened around mid-2014, when I was 17 years old, living in Perth, Australia. It was my final year of high school, and I often spent a couple days a week studying at the local university library near my house, because I didn't get a lot of work done at home. Anyway, where I lived and the uni was considered a pretty safe area, and nothing significant had happened in the area for about 15 years or so I felt quite comfortable walking around at night. One night, after some study around 7 or 8 p.m., I decided to walk to the service station across the road from the uni to get something to eat. So I was casually walking past the petrol browsers. A tall African man in a hailstone-damaged car calls out to me as he was moving his car in neutral gear. His car seemed to be broken down. I help him move his car into one of the customer bays, and I help him sort it out. He tried turning on his ignition, but it wasn't working. Didn't even start the engine at all. Somehow, after then, a few moments, his car magically started again, and he got into it. Then he started asking me weird questions. "Do you like books?" he asks. "Do you speak good English? Where do you learn it?" I'm white and I have an Australian accent, so this is kind of strange. Then he says, "You need Jesus Christ." It was all out of context and very random. I don't remember the whole conversation precisely word for word, but he mentioned something about going to the local recreational center down the road to play a team sport. But the thing was, this particular recreational center down the road closes at 5 p.m. on a Saturday, and is closed on Sunday. This took place on a weekend. So I thought this was really odd that he said he was going there at around 8 or 9 p.m. to play sport. What made this even more creepy was the location of the recreational center being so isolated amongst a small national park, a large field, sleepy soccer, and a farm located on the university property. Therefore, this place is in the middle of nowhere. This is what the field looked like. So I'm pretty much going there at that time would be very creepy and suspicious. I vaguely remember a pause of silence, and out of nowhere he just said, "Get in the car." At that point I froze and just walked off into the service station and hung there for about 20 minutes before I ran back to the library in total fear. The walk to the library is a good 400 or 500 meters through the bushes, car park, and past tennis courts and a courtyard. Because I remember telling him I was studying at the library, I was worried he would park his car and hide amongst the bushes and ambush me as I was walking back to the library. This was probably one of the creepiest experiences in my life so far. I pretty much ceased studying at the library for the night and just relaxed and went home. Man at the servo, let's not meet. Thanks for reading. Feel free to ask me any questions. My friend was having a goodbye party just before moving to New York to pursue his acting career. Since I didn't own a car, I biked over and locked up in front. Around 1 a.m., I'm getting tired and starting to think about the ride back. Better now than even later, I think. I start saying my goodbyes and realize that my guitar had been there since our last hangout, days before the party. I made my own guitar backpack with the case and some straps. Being a small to average woman in her 20s, this made my nighttime ride that much riskier. I get out to my bike, The street is dead. The lights are very dim. By the time I figure out how to get on my bike and balance myself with this giant thing attached to my back, a classic faded white van pulls up. It starts moving alongside me as I begin biking. The two men in front roll down their windows. They ask about the party, wondering if it's open. Sorry, I say. It's a private gathering. Well, that's okay. The best part is leaving, one says, followed by the other saying, let's see what you're doing now. I'll never be able to forget those grins on their faces. They kept following me, moving closer to the side of the road, giving me no space, knowing I was completely defenseless with my guitar and I couldn't escape merely by bike. I squeezed the brakes. By that time they had stopped their car. I had already turned around and went as fast as I could back to the house. Screw the bike. They're not after that. I drop to the ground and I dash in. The stuck-in door frame part was less than graceful, but at least I was safe. And I didn't care. By then they saw the men, and their grins peering through the front window. My friend, a 6'4" beast, and some other guys went outside towards the van. I don't know if the van could drive off any faster than it did after that. No way was I going home. I spent the night, biked in the morning without the guitar, and just had it dropped off on his way to the airport. You awful people in the van, let's not meet. Ever again. Ever. All stories read here have been given permission for me to narrate by the posting users following Reddit submission content and guidelines. Proof of this permission is in the description below. That's all the time I have for today, my friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day or evening. I'm Amori. Now, listen to the spooky tunes. All stories read here have been given permission for me to narrate by the posting users following Reddit's submission content and guidelines. Proof of this permission is in the description below. That's all the time I have for blah 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 blah.